so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life? Well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the reflection and extension of you who will be here each Wednesday interviewing a different consciousness changemaker. And on the other 4 weekdays, leading the way to ensure that your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. Also, before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to take about a minute and a half to tell you about a few sponsors that not only help to make it possible to produce this show 5 days a week, but that I'm also genuinely passionate about promoting. The first longtime stellar supporter of the show that I want to mention is Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online with over 8,000 video titles. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. The second sponsor I'm sincerely passionate about promoting is Purium. It's no mystery that bringing your mind, body, and spirit into balance is necessary if a person truly intends to manifest the greatest and grandest version of themselves. So if you've been looking for a way to easily get organic superfoods into your system every day with a simple plan that can help you reestablish a healthier foundation and relationship with food, like I was doing before I found Purium, I highly recommend going to positivehead.com/transformation and checking out the videos and interviews there where I dive deeply into discussions explaining why I take these products every day. And should you ultimately end up on iShopPurium.com to purchase any of their 50 plus amazing superfood products, be sure to use the code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, for a 25% discount. All right, all you positive heads, welcome, welcome. Here we grow again. So grateful to be with you all, as always. Today, I am going to do a little reading. Every week or two, I like to grab a book and read something inspiring, something to stretch our mind and perspective. And you know, I've been reading, I actually read not too long ago from the book Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. And it's a case study of lives between lives, or case studies of life between lives, I guess you would technically say. And it basically shares, you know, he's a PhD who started hypnotizing people, started having experiences with reincarnation, you know, or past life stuff coming up for people. He was intrigued. He started then exploring what happened after they left their body. And that's what this book is about. Like what happens when you leave a life and then go back to where we came from, essentially. And it's really, really fascinating because, you know, as a scientific mind doctor, he sort of breaks down the different types of things, you know, over years and years and years of doing this, the different types of souls and the different levels and in coloration of the soul's energy on the other side based off of their leveling up as we sort of traverse this game of existence, right? It sort of bleeds over from you have your life, your physical lifetimes, but then that each lifetime is part of a larger game that is sort of accounted for on the other side. So you start at some point from, you know, nothingness in a sense. My guess is on this. My perspective is you sort of, after you've experienced, been it all, been God, at the highest sense, if you will, seen through the eyes of the all, the one. At some point, you choose to come back and sort of start over and experience a different trajectory, a different ride, with a different vantage point, right? And that entails a resetting point where it's like, okay, I'm going to go back and sort of, start over again and take the journey in a different path, in a different way this time. And so he even talks about that at one point in the book where, there's sort of like this, birthing area where new souls are being created at the beginning of this game. And, I think because it's eternity now, it's always, that birthing process is sort of, from one perspective, it's illusory, right? Like it's Source saying, okay, I'm going to go back in. I'm going to go start back at the beginning, but really I'm just pretending because, I am it all, always. And it's, so it's just a very trippy thing to like wrap your mind around. And getting this book is particularly intriguing to me because it just gives you that perspective of, okay, hold on, what's the bigger story? What's the bigger container for this weird thing called life and existence and consciousness? And so I read back a few weeks ago from case study number 21, which was a beginner souls experience going back. And if you guys want to go hear that was episode 821. Today, I'm going to read from case 22, which is an intermediate soul's journey. So part of it is, Michael talking about what he's learned. The other part of it is the interview style discussion with the person in case 22, the intermediate soul, and sort of what they're experiencing and seeing while they're under hypnosis. So I'll do my best to kind of make it apparent when I'm, this is Michael, the author talking. Okay, now we're jumping in and we're in the actual hypnotism session, and in the case study is actually, under hypnosis and is talking back and forth with the doctor. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of inflect to make it, apparent when I'm speaking as the doctor and when I'm answering as the patient, as case study 22 in this case. But we're going to dive right in because this is a pretty long one too. So I'm not sure how long it'll take me to read all of this. So I'm going to just see how far I go, and if there seems to be a point that makes sense to stop, then I'll stop. And if I can make it all the way through without this being like a really, really long episode, then I'll do that as well. So let's just dive in and see where it leads us, shall we? Okay, this is technically chapter 10, The Intermediate Soul of the Book Journey of Souls, from Michael Newton, PhD. Here we go. Once our souls advanced past level 2 into the intermediate ranges of development, group cluster activity is considerably reduced. This does not mean we return to the kind of isolation we saw with the novice soul. Souls evolving into the middle development level have less association with primary groups because they have acquired the maturity and experience for operating more independently. These souls are also reducing the number of their incarnations. Within levels 3 and 4, we are at last ready for more serious responsibilities. The relationship we have with our guides now changes from teacher-student to one of colleagues working together. Since our old guides have acquired new student groups, it is now our turn to develop teaching skills which will eventually qualify us for the responsibilities of being a guide to someone else. I have said the transitional stages of levels 2 and 4 are particularly difficult for me in pinpointing a soul's development. For instance, some level 4 souls begin targeting themselves toward primary cluster teacher training while still in level 3, while other subjects who are clearly level 4s find they are unsuited to be effective guides. Despite their high standards of morality and conduct, entities who have reached the intermediate levels of maturity are modest about their achievements. Naturally, each case is different, but I notice more composure with clients in this stage and above. I see trust rather than suspicion toward the motives of others on both a conscious and subconscious level. These people demonstrate a forward-looking attitude of faith and confidence for the future of humanity, which encourages those around them. My question to the more mature souls are directed to esoteric ideas of purpose and creation. I admit to taking advantage of the higher knowledge possessed by these souls for the sort of spiritual information others lack. There have been clients who have told me they felt I pushed them rather hard in drawing out their spiritual memories, and I know they are right. The more advanced souls of this world possess remarkable comprehension of a universal life plan. I want to learn as much as possible from them. My next case falls into the upper portion of level 3 development, radiating a yellow energy devoid of any reddish tones. This client was a small, nondescript man nearly 50 years old. His demeanor was quite quietly courteous towards me when we met, and I thought him a trifle solemn. I felt his unassuming detachment was somewhat studied, almost as a cover for some stronger emotions. The most striking feature about him was his dark, morose eyes, which grew more intense as he began to talk about himself in a direct and persuasive manner. He told me he worked for a charitable organization dispensing food to the homeless, and that he had once been a journalist. This client had traveled quite some distance to discuss with me his concern over a decline in enthusiasm for his work. He said he was tired and wanted to spend the rest of his life quietly alone. His first session involved a review of the highlights of many past lives so we could better evaluate a proper course for the remainder of his current life. I began by regressing the subject rapidly through a series of early lives, starting from his first life as a Cro-Magnon man in a Stone Age culture some 30,000 years ago. As we move forward in time, I noted a consistency of lone wolf behavior patterns as opposed to normal tribal integration. From about 3000 BC to 500 BC, my client lived a number of lives in the Middle East during the rise of the early city-states in Sumerian, Babylonian, and Egyptian cultures. Nevertheless, even in lives as a woman, this subject often avoided family ties, including having no children. As a man, he showed a preference for nomadism. By the time we reached a life in Europe during the Dark Ages, I was becoming accustomed to a rebellious soul resisting tyrannical societies. During his lives, my subject worked to uplift people from fear while remaining non-aligned to opposing factions. Suffering hardships and many setbacks, he continued as a wanderer with an obsession for freedom of movement. Some lives were not too productive, but during the 12th century, I found him in Central America in the body of an Aztec, organizing a band of Indians against the oppressions of a high priest. He was killed in this setting as a virtual outcast, while promoting non-violent relations between tribes who were traditional enemies. In the 14th century, the soul was a European chronicle traveling the Silk Road to Cathay, C-A-T-H-A-Y, to gain understanding of the peoples of Asia. Always facile with languages, as he is today, my client died in Asia as an old man happily living in a peasant village. In Japan, at the beginning of the 17th century, he was a member of the clan of the Bleeding Crane. These men were respected, independent samurai mercenaries. At the end of this life, my subject was living in seclusion from the ruling Tokugawa shoguns, because he had advised their weaker opponents on battle strategy. Frequently the outsider, always an explorer searching for truth across many lands, this soul continued to seek a rational meaning to life while giving aid to those he met along the way. I was surprised when he popped up as the wife of an American farmer on the frontier in the 19th century. The farmer died soon after the marriage. I learned my subject had deliberately incarnated to be a widow with children, tied to a piece of property as an exercise in the loss of mobility. When this part of his session ended, I knew he was working with a more advanced, older soul, even though he had a great many lives we did not review. Since this soul is approaching level 4, I would not have been surprised if his first appearance on Earth had gone back 70,000 years, rather than half that amount of time. However, as I've mentioned, it is not an absolute prerequisite that souls have hundreds of physical lives in order to advance. I once had a client who entered into a level 3 state of awareness after only 4,000 years, an outstanding performance. I talked to my client about his current life and his customary methods of learning in previous lives. He explained he had never been married and that social non-alignments worked best for him. I suggested a few alternatives for his consideration. Primarily, I felt his lack of intimacy with people in too many lives was obstructing his progress. When this session ended, he was anxious that we explore his mind further for perceptions about the spirit world in another session. Upon his arrival the next day, I placed him in a superconscious state and we went back to work. All right, pretty fascinating, right? So this guy's got a theme that he, sort of followed throughout many lifetimes. And yeah, pretty cool. And as you see, that he's advanced to some degree on his own path. And of course, I find it interesting that he is helping people consistently along the way, which I would imagine is a prerequisite for leveling up, right? As you become less of the self-centered, self-serving soul and seek to lift others on the path. All right, here's where he's in the second session where they kind of go in between lives, right? This is case 22. And like I said, I'll start out, sort of talking as the doctor and then answering, trying to inflect my voice so you can tell when I'm answering versus when I'm, the doctor versus the patient. The doctor said, "By what name are you called in the spirit world?" "I am called Nintham." "Nintham, do you have spirits around you right now or are you alone?" "I am with two of my longtime companions." "What are their names?" "Raul and Sinji." "And are the three of you part of a larger spiritual group or souls working together?" "We were, but now the three of us work more by ourselves." "What are the three of you doing at this moment?" "We are discussing the best way to help each other during our incarnations." Tell me what you do for each other." "I help Sinji to forgive herself for mistakes and appreciate her own worth. She needs to stop being a mother figure all the time on Earth." "How does she assist you?" To see my lack of a sense of belonging." "Give me an example of Sinji's actions to assist you with this issue." "Well, she was my wife in Japan after my days as a warrior were over." Something is troubling Ninthium. After a pause, he adds the following. "Raul likes to pair with Sinji, and I am usually alone." "What about Raul? How do you two help each other?" "I help him with patience, and he helps me with my tendency to avoid community life." "Are you always two males and a female in your incarnations on Earth?" "No, we can change and do, but this is comfortable for us." "Why are the three of you working independently from the rest of your spiritual group?" "Oh, we see them here. Some have not gone forward with us. A few others are further ahead of us in their tasks." "Do you have a guide or teacher?" "She is Itis." "It sounds to me as if you have a high regard for her. Do you communicate well with Itis?" "Yes, I do. Not that we don't have our disagreements." "What is the main area of conflict between the two of you?" "She doesn't reincarnate much, and I tell her she should have more direct exposure to current conditions on Earth." "Are you mentally in tune with Itis to such an extent that you know all about her background training as a guide?" Shakes his head while pondering. "It isn't that we can't ask questions, but we can only question what we know. Itis reveals to me what she thinks is relevant to my own experience." "Are guides able to screen their thoughts so you can't read their minds completely?" "Yes, the older ones get proficient at that, knowing how to filter things we don't need to know because this knowledge would confuse us." "Will you learn to filter images?" "I already have, a little." "This must be why I've had many people tell me they have not been given definitive answers by their guides to all their questions." "Yes, and the intent of the question is important. When it was asked and why. Perhaps it was not in their best interest to be given certain information which might disrupt them." "Aside from her teaching techniques, are you fond of Itis in terms of her identity?" "Yes, I just wish she would agree to come with me once." "Oh, you would like to actually have an Earth incarnation with her?" Grins mischievously. "I have told her we might relate better here if she would consent to come to Earth sometimes and mate with me." "And what does Itis say to that suggestion?" "She laughs and says she'll think about it if I can prove to her that it would be productive." At this junction, I asked Nintham how long Itis has been associated with him, and there's a little break now, just the doctor talking. At this junction, I asked Nintham how long Itis has been associated with him and learn she was assigned these three entities when they moved into level 3. Nintham, Raul, and Sinji are also under the tutelage of a beloved older master guide who has been with them since the beginning of their existence. It would be inaccurate to assume that more advanced spirits lead lonely spiritual lives. This subject told me he was in contact with many souls. Raul and Sinji were simply his closest friends. Levels 3 and 4 are significant stages for souls in their development because now they are given increased responsibilities for younger souls. The status of a guide is not given to us all at once, however. As with many other aspects of soul life, we are carefully tested. The intermediate levels are trial periods for potential teachers. While our aura is still yellow, our mentors assign us a soul to look after and then evaluate our leadership performance both in and out of physical incarnations. Only if this preliminary training is successful are we allowed to function even at the level of a junior guide. Not everyone is suited for teaching, but this does not keep us from becoming an advanced soul in the blue section. Guides, like everyone else, have different abilities and talents as well as shortcomings. By the time we reach level 5, our soul aptitudes are well known in the spirit world. We are given occupational duties commensurate with our abilities, which I will go into later in this chapter. Different avenues of approach to learning eventually bring all of us to the same end in acquiring spiritual wholeness. The richness of diversity is part of a master plan for the advancement of every soul, and I am interested in how Case 22 is progressing in level 3. Back to their dialogue. Nintham, can you tell me if Itis is preparing you to be a guide, assuming you have an interest in that activity? I do have an interest. Oh, then you are developing as a guide yourself? Don't make too much of it. I'm really no more than a caretaker, helping Itis and taking directions. Do you try and imitate her teaching style? No, we are different. As an apprentice, a caretaker, I couldn't do what she is able to accomplish anyway. When did you know you were ready to be a caretaker and begin assisting others spiritually? It's an awareness which comes over you after a great number of lives, that you are more in balance with yourself than previously and are able to aid people as a spirit and in the flesh. Are you operating in or out of the spirit world as a caretaker at this time? Has difficulty in forming a response here. He says, I'm out in 2 lives. Are you living in 2 parallel lives now? Yes, I am. Where are you living in this other life? Canada. Is geography important to your Canadian assignment? Yes, I picked a poor family in a rural community where I would be more indispensable. I'm in a small mountain town. Give me the details of this Canadian life and your responsibilities. I'm taking care of my brother Billy. His face and hands were horribly burned by a flash fire from a kitchen stove when he was 4 years old. I was 10 when it happened. Are you the same age in the Canadian life as you are now in your American one? About the same. In your prime assignment in the Canadian life? To care for Billy, to help him see the world past his pain. He is almost blind and his facial disfigurement causes him to be rejected by the community. I try to open him to an acceptance of life and to know who he really is from the inside. I read to him and go for walks in the forest holding his arm. I don't hold his hands because they are so damaged. What about your Canadian parents? I am the parent. My father left after the fire and never came back. He was a weak man who was not kind in the family even before the fire. He was not kind to the family even before the fire. My mother's soul is not very capable in her body. They need someone with seasoning. Someone physically strong? No, I'm a woman in Canada. I'm Billy's sister. My mother and brother require someone mentally tough to hold the family together and give them a course to follow. How do you provide for the family? I'm a baker, and I'll never marry because I can't leave them. What is your brother's major lesson? To acquire humility without being crushed by a life of little self-gratification. Why didn't you take the role of your burned brother? Wouldn't that scenario provide you with the more difficult challenge? I've already been through that one. Note, this subject has been physically injured in a number of past lives. Doctor, yes, I suppose you have. I wonder if Billy's soul was ever involved with physically hurting you in one of your past lives. As a matter of fact, he did in one of them. When I was the sufferer, another caretaker stayed with me, and I was a grateful receiver. Now it's Billy's turn, and I am here for him. Did you know in advance your brother was going to be incapacitated before you came into the Canadian life? Sure, Itis and I discussed the whole situation. She said Billy's soul would require a caretaker, and since I had negative contact with the soul before in another life, I welcomed the job. Besides the karmic lesson for Billy's soul, there are some for you too, in terms of your being in the role of a woman who is tied down. You can't just take off and roam around as you often do in your lives. That's true. The degree of difficulty in a life is measured by how challenging the situation is for you, not others. For me, being Billy's caretaker is harder than when I was on the receiving end with another soul as my caretaker. Give me the most difficult factor of this assignment for you as a caretaker. To sustain a child through their helplessness to adulthood, to teach a child to confront torment with courage. Billy's life is an extreme example, but it does seem Earth's children have much physical and emotional pain to go through. Without addressing and overcoming pain, you can never really connect with who you are and build on that. I must tell you, the more pain and adversity which comes to you as a child, the more opportunity to expand your potential. And how are things working out for you as a caretaker in Canada? There is a more difficult set of choices to be made in the Canadian family, unlike my American life, but I have confidence in myself to put my comprehension to practical use. Did I encourage or discourage your wanting to accelerate development by living parallel lives? She is always open about this. I haven't done it too much in the past. Why not? Life combinations can be tiring and divisive. The effort may become counterproductive with the diminished returns for both lives. Well, I see that you are helping people in both your lives today, but have you ever lived contrasting lives where you did poorly in one life and better in another at the same time? Yes, although that was a long time ago on Earth. This is one of the advantages of life combinations. One life can offset the other. Still, doing this can be rough going. Then why do the guides permit parallel lives? Souls are not in a rigid bureaucratic environment. We are allowed to make mistakes in judgment and learn from them. I have the impression you think the average soul is better off living one life at a time. I would say yes in most instances, but there are other motivations to cause us to speed up incarnations, such as the rewards for bunching up lives can allow for more reflection out of incarnation. You mean the rest periods between lives might last longer for us after concurrent lives? Sure. It takes longer to reflect on two lives than one. Nintham, I have just a couple more questions to the mechanics of soul splitting. How do you see the manner in which you divide your soul energy into various parts? We are, as particles of energized units. We originated out of one unit. What was the original unit? The maker. Does each part of your soul remain intact, complete within itself? Yes, it does. Do all parts of our soul energy go out of the spirit world when we incarnate? Part of us never leaves, since we do not totally separate from the maker. What does the part that remains in the spirit world do while we are on Earth in one or more bodies? It is more dormant, waiting to be rejoined to the rest of our energy. All right, well, that takes us, there's still more to go, but I think that's a good stopping point with this particular case study. Pretty fascinating stuff, right? You know, notice how I said here, without addressing and overcoming pain, you can never really connect with who you are and build on that. I must tell you, the more pain and adversity which come to you as a child, the more opportunity to expand your potential. So I really like that. It reminds me of a quote I have jotted down in the past from Richard Rudd. I have here. It says, "The greater the pressure in your life, the more fortunate you are." And so for those of you out there, especially those of you who have had a really difficult childhood that has maybe held you back, right? Like taking that perspective on it, it's like your soul is such a badass that you signed up for that experience so that you could become more, so you could expand more. Expand your potential and your opportunity more. Like what a different story that is to tell about your past and your hardship, or the mother or father that wasn't there, and all these things. As you can see by this story here, this guy's perspective, like with the Canadian life, that was set up by default, right? It's necessary for the experience to be fully had. And so, yeah, I love how this whole book really just affirms everything that we've been talking about for years on the show. And it's always happening for you and not to you. And yeah, with that being said, we'll wind down today, but I will pick up here at some point with this case study, case 22, in the coming week or weeks, and we'll hear the rest of Nintham's story and perspective on what the heck is going on behind the curtain. And I hope you guys have found this as fascinating as I have and enjoyed it as much as I have. I do have a song to leave you with. This is Random Rab. The song is Sons of Midnight. Hope you enjoy. Until next time, journey well. Also, before we cue up today's song, I wanted to let you all know that we have finally created the Game with the Universe on our website, where you can choose the first number that comes to your mind and it'll pull up that episode number of the podcast. I've been saying this is a great way to co-create synchronicity and magic with your higher self for quite some time by doing this manually. But now if you go to positivehead.com/YO universe, there is a super fun and simple interface to play this game with your higher self. I firmly believe just by setting the intention to play in this way, it opens up the door for magic, and it's a synchronistic way to hone in on nuggets of wisdom out of the huge catalog of episodes that are specifically appropriate for you at this time in your journey to becoming the next greatest and grandest version of yourself. And it also makes for a super fun way to engage and invite friends, family, people on social media to check out the podcast as well. So be sure to check out positivehead.com/YOUNIVERSE and be sure to tell all your friends so they can play a game with the universe, which also helps the show to reach new people, which I greatly appreciate. And as a quick reminder, be sure to also check out positivehead.com/transformation if you're curious to learn more about Purium superfoods and why I take them every day. On this journey of becoming the next greatest and grandest version of ourselves that we have all embarked upon, I can't stress the importance of managing your physical vibration enough. And quite honestly, Purium has put together the simplest plan I've found to do so, and I'm sincerely excited to share it with all of you. Lastly, if you're craving more consciousness elevating content, be sure to check out Gaia, which is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web, where you can stream an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. As you all hear me constantly say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to journey deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out.